Story 1. Kidney stones are basically the closest a man gets to giving birth, without the reward of a baby at the end. Story 2. You gave a home run baseball to a stranger after giving it to your son for his birthday. Story 3. Getting home and realizing your to-go order is wrong or a sauce is missing. Story 4. I had a muscle spasm in my neck once. It lasted for 3 days. Whenever I moved, my neck would seize up for about a minute. It was far more painful than a nut shot. Also, burns. Story 5. Broken femurs and spinal cord injuries are the next runners-up. It is more about how hard you were hit. If there was no popping, the pain subsides much faster than with most other injuries. Story 6. Kidney stones? Childbirth? Story 7. Roughly half the population of a certain country appears to hold beliefs based on limited information. Story 8. Giving birth and a long-lasting root canal infection, oh my lord, were the worst pains I have ever experienced. Story 9. A ruptured appendix caused peritonitis. It was the worst pain I have ever experienced. Story 10. A root canal in which the anesthetic did not reach the nerve inside the tooth. Story 11. I applied rubbing alcohol to a chafed ass and a freshly fucked dick and balls. I went to another dimension of pain. Story 12. Realizing you voted for a convicted felon, con artist, rapist, and pedophile instead of a woman. Story 13. I've heard that a kick to the testicles is worse than giving birth because a man never wants to experience it again, even a year or two later. Story 14. I always wonder why people try to kick the groin. A kick to the lower abdomen just above the genitals is far more painful. That said, people find a strike to the throat far more upsetting. Story 15. Menstruation. In all seriousness, the women said that if the pain were only from being struck in the testicles, they would prefer that to their ongoing menstrual pain and related ordeals. Third-degree burns are especially severe. The smell of burned flesh is unforgettable, and the aftermath can be gruesome for survivors. Story 16. Being scalped? I don't know, man. I imagine a lot of things. Story 17. A kick to the chest after falling backward onto your tailbone. Story 18. Kidney stones feel like a constant kick in the groin until you pass them or have them removed. Story 19. When she says the big ones hurt and then wonders why you became quiet after receiving such a compliment. Story 20. Being loved, needed, and respected only as long as you are able to provide. Story 21. I was poked in the left testicle with the end of a pool cue 3 weeks after a vasectomy. It caused internal bleeding and swelling. He succeeded in putting me off potting the black. Story 22. A gallbladder attack. Your immune system is attacking a bad tooth. Story 23. When I was a preteen, I rode up a ramp on my bike. For some reason, I let go of the bike and landed flat on my back. The bike was fine. Its collision with the ground was cushioned by my groin. I will never forget that pain. The older cousin who was babysitting my other cousin and me thought I was dying. Story 24. A bad ear infection. Dry socket after a tooth extraction. Nothing has ever caused me as much suffering. I would have taken a hard kick in the groin if it offered relief. Every hour or so if necessary. Story 25. I am sure there are many worse things possible, but back spasms from a degenerative disc are the worst pain I have felt in my life. 10 times worse than anything else. Recovery takes weeks. During the first week or so, I seriously questioned whether I wanted to live. Story 26. I get hurt by objects at random times. It just happens to me. Story 27. Uric acid kidney stones. They are like miniature ninja stars. Having been kicked in the family jewels many times did not compare to the sheer pain of a kidney stone episode. Story 28. Being extremely stressed and barely holding it together when the person you love and trust most does something easily avoidable that still negatively affects you. Story 29. Pinched nerve in my back. I never knew pain could make you throw up. It happened to my wife as well. The emergency medications are terrible. The muscle relaxer causes constipation and makes you need to urinate every 15 minutes. The pain medications are extremely addictive. Story 30. I love how most answers are to the balls, followed by an even larger, faster object to the balls. Story 31. I was leaving a golf course in the 1990s. As I strolled, I was swinging a club at my side, and at one point it hit my shin and it hurt badly. I could barely stand, and as the pain set in, I almost vomited. By the time I reached a place to sit, I was sweating profusely and my shin felt like a hot coal under the skin. My shin was not broken, but walking was touch and go for a day or so, and my leg hurt for a couple of weeks. Story 32. Nothing. The human body is a machine and cannot register pain beyond a certain threshold. It is all the same at some point and just feels like death. Story 33. I used to apologize in advance to my roommate on the other side of the hospital curtain for the screaming he would hear during catheterization. Imagine a thick needle being inserted into your urethra. That is exactly what it felt like. Story 34. A kidney stone and then a stent from the kidney to the bladder. I will welcome death before I go through that again. Story 35. Gallstones. A torn anterior cruciate ligament. Car wreck. Rheumatoid arthritis. A migraine. A kick to the testicles is still about 9 out of 10 on the pain scale. Story 36. Serious answer. A cluster headache. I have had exactly one in my life, and it was far worse than a testicular injury. It feels like a power drill carving into your face. Story 37. Mortgage payments, taxes, tickets, lack of sex, grocery bills, being cut off on the road, and ball rash. I am out of time. Story 38. Every text that begins with "I think you're a great guy, but..." Story 39. During a hemorrhoidectomy at a teaching hospital, the patient is awakened mid-procedure to ensure they are okay. A noise prompts them to look behind and discover a room full of young nurses observing the surgery. Story 40. Kidney stones, often considered extremely painful. Gallstones, ovarian or testicular torsion, twisted supporting structures that cut off blood supply. Second-degree burns, but not third-degree burns, which tend to destroy nerves. Pelvic bone fracture. Story 41. Letting go of a friend you thought cherished you. Story 42. I used to get stomach cramps that felt like a hot poker being jammed directly into my gut. The pain was so intense that I could do nothing but scream. Story 43. Gallstones and waking up after gallbladder surgery were the worst pain I've had. I'm glad the little bastard is gone. Story 44. I don't know. I had my heart ripped out once. I think a kick in the testicles would have felt better. Story 45. My wife said she loves me but is not in love with me. That hurt pretty badly, worse than when I slipped on a fence rail and ruptured a testicle which required emergency surgery. Story 46. I thought there was a piece of delicious pie left over, only to realize it was a mirage. Story 47. Severe tooth pain is horrendous. I've nearly passed out due to it. Story 48. Food poisoning feels like you are being stabbed in the stomach with a butcher knife. Story 49. I underwent spinal fusion surgery. I have 18 inches of titanium holding my spine together. Story 50. Growing up and realizing that your parents could have been better but chose not to be. Story 51. A renal stone feels like a continual kick in the testicles. Thank God for morphine. Story 52. The first night after my vasectomy was uncomfortable. It was much better the next day. Story 53. Kidney stone. The worst part of a kick to the testicles is not the immediate pain. The pain starts 4 to 6 seconds after the blow. You feel fine during that short delay, then have the realization that the pain is coming and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Story 54. Seeing the gradual decline of a former partner's love for you, leading to the inevitable end. Story 55. Appendicitis. I would have begged for a kick in the groin if it would make the other pain go away. Story 56. You receive a local anesthetic injection on each side of the scrotum during a vasectomy. The more sensitive side hurts the most, and it feels like the needle is going through you. You remember the nurse saying that if you think that hurts, move and it will feel a lot worse. Story 57. From personal experience. Peritonitis or tearing the anterior cruciate ligament. Story 58. You were told that Mr. Rogers would be disappointed by your actions as his neighbor. Story 59. I had an abscess on my mandible after getting my wisdom teeth removed. I expected they would drain it and that would be it. They gave me a numbing shot that did not work, and the dentist proceeded to lean on me while he used a metal hook to scrape the infection away from the bone. I was writhing in the chair and crying. I had to pay them to do that to me, and it hurt even more. Story 60. I am a soccer goalkeeper. Getting hit in the groin happens occasionally. I have gotten used to the pain and can usually walk it off and keep playing without stopping for an injury timeout. However, there have been a few unfortunate times, maybe 2 or 3 in my career when I was hit, kept playing, and then was struck again less than a minute later. At that point, I tell everyone I need to lie on the ground for a minute or so and take a short break, laughing out loud. Story 61. Lots of things. Getting kicked in the groin lasts minutes. A really strong impact you might feel for an hour or so, but unless you rupture something, not longer. It is a 6 to 8 on a pain scale where 10 is being eaten alive by a rabid grizzly bear with chainsaws for arms. Getting kicked in the groin is nowhere near a 10. I tore a back muscle and was at a solid 7 for 4 months straight, around the clock. I had a sciatic flare-up that almost made me pass out. I could not breathe or move, but I did not lose consciousness. It was a solid 9, but it lasted hours, not months. I have had several debilitating migraines lasting from a couple of hours to about 8 hours. The kind where feeling the heartbeat in your eyeballs hurts enough to make you vomit, and you cannot do anything. Those were probably 8 or higher. My wife had a herniated disc that left her crying for a week until she could see a doctor. That was an 8 to 9. I worked with a man whose high-mobility multipurpose wheeled vehicle rolled over his leg and ground his foot off at the ankle from the vehicle's weight. At the same time, a tooth struck his eye, popping it. He might have reached a 10, he passed out. I could not find his foot. Getting kicked in the groin hurts. But there are many worse things. Story 62. I do not have testicles and do not know the pain, but I am fairly confident that childbirth is not only more painful but also lasts longer. Story 63. Third-degree burns, childbirth, having a president who is a suspected pedophile, a dentist failing to properly anesthetize you before drilling a tooth, venoms from certain animals, cancer, emotional pain, opioid withdrawal, and many other things. Story 64. I was almost drowned as a child. I remember I couldn't get out of the water for a while, and I'm just glad they stopped and left. Traumatized me and left me with a lasting fear of deep water. Story 65. Being betrayed by someone close to you is painful. The closer they are, the deeper the wound. Story 66. I have to be honest. I might be jinxing this. As an adult, it has been so long since I was kicked in the testicles that I can no longer remember the pain. Story 67. A kick to each testicle individually might be worse. In fact, that is a better question. Which is worse, one swift kick to both testicles at once or a kick evenly divided between them? Story 68. A kick in the ball. That's entertainment. La la la. Story 69. I played first base in college. I took a routine throw from third base that hit the heel of my glove and struck my left testicle. I had to have it surgically removed. It still hurts 40 years later. Fun times at our reunions. Story 70. The idea that the most powerful man in the world is probably a pedophile and that an entire political party now exists solely to help him cover it up by staging a military invasion of his own cities and causing random civilian deaths in international waters to distract from allegations that he touched children is deeply troubling. Story 71. I don't have balls, but I do know kidney stones hurt like hell. Story 72. Pancreatitis. There was no position I could put myself in that was not absolute agony. It took pachydermic quantities of morphine to get the pain under control. 0 out of 10. I would not recommend. Story 73. Hitting an ingrown or infected toenail against an object is extremely painful. It is very sensitive. A single light touch can cause severe pain. Story 74. I don't have balls, so I could be incorrect. However, I do have endometriosis. As a trans man, I'd be willing to trade a kick in the balls for inner cunt turmoil. Story 75. I have always wondered why Americans say grow some balls when, in reality, Balls are the weakest and most sensitive part of a male's body. How about saying grow a vagina instead? Story 76. Sneezing or coughing with broken ribs. You will see Grandma and Elvis at the end of the tunnel of light. Story 77. You bite the tips of your middle fingernails for 10 seconds, then squeeze your hand. Story 78. Or switch it up. Skin the balls, then kick them while they are on fire. Great bald balls of fire. Story 79. My wife ran out to buy alcohol after I begged her to stop. Story 80. Maybe more because of the expectation, but a hard flick of the finger to the testicles. Story 81. I recently ran a 160-kilometer ultramarathon on mixed terrain. The pain at the end of that run was so intense that I would prefer to take a few kicks instead. Story 82. Is it just me, or is ball pain different from anything else? Not to say it's the worst, but it's kind of like if someone used your shin to smash your funny bone and then everyone points and laughs at you. Story 83. Broken ribs are very unpleasant both immediately after the injury and for the next few weeks. Story 84. A testicular abscess causes persistent pain. Pain from a kick is temporary and may radiate, but abscess pain can last for weeks. Story 85. When your child is sick or hurt. When a loved one dies. When someone stops loving you. Story 86. A kick to the face, the kneecap, or the spine can be painful. Although testicular pain is unusual, it is not the worst. Story 87. Have you ever played Yoshi's World on the Switch with younger kids? Story 88. Testicular torsion and a kidney stent. When your body rejects the stent but you must keep it in place. Story 89. If you ask a woman like my wife, she would be punched in the breasts. Story 90. Pilonidal cysts, staph infections, and shingles all cause significant pain. Story 91. As bad as that is, many things hurt more. Burning, drilling into your hand, ask me how I know, and metal shavings in your eye. Story 92. Burns, kidney stones, childbirth, dilation and curettage, and a broken femur. Those are just off the top of my head. Story 93. Having your period for a couple of days every month for years. Story 94. Football to the groin. It works on so many levels. Story 95. You find out that your best friend has been having sex with the love of your life behind your back. Story 96. Supposedly childbirth, but you will never hear a man say, "Can I have another kick in the balls?" Obviously sarcastic. Story 97. Does anyone else think of this Jimmy Carr bit? Story 98. Getting hot caramel or maple syrup on your skin. The latter happened to my grandfather. It developed into cancer and he died. Story 99. Realizing that the dream we were sold as children was always a lie. Story 100. When you are speaking and realize that no one is listening. Story 101. 2. I can speak to our heart attack and collapsed lung. I would take a kick in the testicles over either of those any day. Now, if I received dilaudid, a kick in the testicles would be more tolerable. Story 102. Burns should come before a kick to the groin. I would also include breaking a tooth in half on the bottom of a swimming pool, followed by chlorine stinging the exposed nerve. Story 103. Trying to have a bowel movement with a severe herniated disc between the 4th and 5th lumbar vertebrae. Story 104. Have you ever walked in on your girl cheating on you and watched her put it back in when it slipped out? Has it happened to me? No, but I'm pretty sure that would hurt a lot worse than getting kicked in the balls. Story 105. Trigeminal nerve pain. I have given birth twice without pain medication. I would rather do that multiple times than ever deal with whatever level of hell trigeminal nerve pain comes from again. Story 106. Maybe have a baby, but we will never know. Story 107. A kick with cowboy boots landed in the middle of the bag, catching Jiba as well. Story 108. A toothache, especially one that arrives on a Friday night when you must wait until Monday to see a dentist, is unbearable. A kick in the groin hurts but passes. A toothache throbs and feels endless. Story 109. Having your testicles seared and the inner tubing cut apart while the anesthetic does not work as it should. Story 110. When you develop feelings for someone and finally work up the courage to tell them, bam, you are in the friend zone. Story 111. Many things can cause extreme distress. For instance, severe migraines can make someone want to take their own life. I have never heard of anyone being kicked in the testicles and wanting to take their own life from the pain. Story 112. Knowing that most of my generational cohort will not experience the prosperity of our parents by a wide margin. Story 113. Imagining being kicked in the testicles and then being unable to stop thinking about it. Story 114. Watching Amy Schumer perform stand-up comedy in its entirety. Story 115. Kidney stones are worse. Apparently they are even worse than giving birth, but I have never and will never experience that. A kick to the testicles will hurt for 10 to 15 minutes depending on how hard you were hit, and then fade into an ache. Kidney stones, however, are pure agony until they are gone, which can last for days on end. Story 116. A muscle spasm in the trapezius. An angle iron stuck in the back of the calf. Muscle tears. A rough breakup. Story 117. Kidney stones, being stabbed, organ failure, childbirth, catching on fire, breaking a bone, and so on. I know we often act as if getting hit in the testicles is the worst pain ever, but that perception is mainly because we do not experience pain often, and when we do it is usually not that severe. Story 118. In my experience, getting a softball to the balls while you are kneeling to field a sharply hit line drive in the outfield is painful. You still have to get 2 more outs. Story 119. I would rather be kicked in the testicles with a full-force blow than just tapped. For some reason, a light tap that makes them rattle stings more and lasts longer than a full kick. Story 120. I used to ride street bicycle motocross. Damaging a handrail or your frame after a bad landing is terrible. Story 121. Someone casts accio on your balls, then smashes them with a hammer. Story 122. Pancreatitis pain is the worst pain I have ever experienced. Story 123. Kidney stones measuring 6 to 12 millimeters often do not pass. When larger, they do not travel and instead cause persistent localized pain. Story 124. Slipping on the crutches you were just handed. You instinctively try to catch yourself with the leg you recently broke, which has only a first aid splint. Story 125. I was kicked in the balls once by a mule. I thought I would be in pain for the rest of my life, but do you know what happened the very next week? My mother died. After that, I did not care about my pain. Rube Baker, Major League 2. Story 126. Compound dislocation of your ankle with a shattered subtalar joint in your foot. It is alarming when you can look down and see the bottom of your foot. Story 127. Breaking your shoulder blade while completing a military obstacle course. Story 128. I've been hit in the groin by lacrosse shots that inverted my protective cup. That was painful. Kidney stones are far worse. Story 129. Assuming we are still talking about men, passing a kidney stone that is 4 millimeters or larger. Story 130. The 2 worst pains in my life. 1. A case of swimmer's ear that spread to the bone. The pain was so bad I could not sleep the night before I went to the hospital. 2. Falling off a roof, landing on one foot, and crushing most of the bones in that foot. Morphine took away the ear pain entirely, while it only made the broken bone pain bearable. Story 131. Don't say childbirth. Why? Because you've never heard a man come to his wife and ask her what she thinks about kicking him again. Story 132. Kidney stone was the best experience in my life so far. Oh, how I miss my little Rocky. Rest in peace. Story 133. Giving birth, I assume. It depends on the person and the situation, though. I had a kidney stone and held different women's hands during births. The 2 women had drastically different experiences, and I got through the stone relatively easily. Story 134. Menstrual cramps. I remember one guy telling me that if menstrual cramps and getting kicked in the testicles were at about the same pain level, guys would be crying to each other, "Hey man, you know what tomorrow is?" I couldn't argue with him. Story 135. Have you ever been kicked full force in the sternum? That really hurts. Story 136. My throat. I played and umpired a lot of baseball. I was hit twice. Once as a catcher, I took a foul tip off the top of my mask after the ball glanced off my glove. As an umpire, a foul tip somehow found its way under my mask. It hurt, but in hindsight, it was probably the sheer terror of not being able to breathe. Story 137. A paper cut on the tongue followed by eating salt and vinegar crisps. Story 138. A tiny human trying to exit your vagina. Kidney stones. Story 139. Receiving an accurate, forceful flick to the tip of a testicle. Story 140. When you get hit in the nuts, your whole body shuts down. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.